us. The meeting is being recorded. That's great. We have a very full agenda tonight, so I'm prepared to go to 10 p.m. 10 p.m. Central Time, and we'll check in and see where we are and to see how much we can get through. And so welcome everyone. Thank you all for being here, and thank you in advance for your patience, attention, and service this evening. The second item on our agenda is to approve the minutes from the June meeting. Is there a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
I'll second.
You may be cutting out President McKeag. At least I didn't hear anything after the second if you were speaking.
Oh, great. Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Is there any discussion on the minutes as presented? I'm sorry, are you still having trouble hearing me?
No, you're good.
Nope, just
Okay.
silence, I think. Yep.
No discussion.
Oh, okay. Okay, I had one, I believe I had one item that I emailed in advance to Crystal. There was a reference to the comprehensive plan being the Bible that we should follow, and I just think in general it's not good for us to be referencing religious works in our minutes. So that's just a minor detail. I think in general, I noticed that the minutes are quite long, and they're also pretty subjective. And so I think I'll
President McKeag, I think you're cutting out again unless it's my connection.
No, she cut out.
I don't think that's very accessible for people that are trying to read the minutes and follow our business. So I'll work with staff before the next meeting and see what we can do.
President McKay, since that was my comment that you were, that Crystal had transcribed, maybe we could just change that to say that that should be our go-to plan, or, you know, something kind of generic like that.
If you would, you know, we could make a friendly amendment that way.
Sounds good to me. Yep.
All right, thank you. I appreciate that. All right, are there any other changes to the minutes? Okay, hearing none. All those in favor of adopting them with the one minor change that we just discussed?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, any opposed? No? Okay. Those minutes approved. If I have any internet connections, I'll go off camera to see if that helps. So just give me a signal. All right, moving on to item 3. It's a conditional use application for a fitness center located at 3514 North Oakland Avenue. We have it agenda Bart is going to give us an overview, and then we will have the public hearing, and then we will have the Plan Commission deliberation. So I'll hand it over to Director Griefentag at this point.
Thank you, President McKeag. Hopefully you're seeing my screen here right now.
Yes.
So what is before us today is a conditional use permit application for Brew Fitness at 3514. As I've done in the past, I will read the record. I also have the staff report generally summarized on the slides before us tonight. So Ryan Melziva of Brew Fitness has applied to operate a fitness center at 3514 North Oakland Avenue within the first floor rear portion of the 2-story mixed tenant commercial building. The property is zoned B1 Commercial Use District. The B1 Commercial Use District is intended to provide the village with a mix of retail, service, restaurant, office and residential uses in a pedestrian-friendly, active shopping environment. Building massing, scale, and appearance in the general character of this district should be oriented towards a small town, Main Street pedestrian character. Here's an overview of the site in question. It is on the east side of Oakland Avenue, just north of Edgewood. Fitness centers are not expressly permitted, conditioned, nor prohibited within the zoning code. So per 535-10B shall be considered by the Plan Commission as a conditional use with public hearing if the Plan Commission determines that the use is substantially similar to a permitted use or an existing conditional use allowed in the district. As with previous approvals for Anytime Fitness, Orange Theory Fitness, Power Cycle, and the Exercise Coach, fitness studios have been considered similar to dance instruction studios listed within 535-21C and approved as conditional uses. No exterior modifications to the building or lot are proposed with this application. The applicant has obtained building, electrical, and plumbing permits for interior renovations, which include the addition of ADA compliant restroom facilities. Proposed operations, Brew Fitness will lease approximately 3,400 square feet of the northeast first floor within the 11,750 square foot building. Entrance to the tenant.
Bart, excuse me, Bart. If everybody could remember to mute their microphones, that would be great. Thank you. You can continue.
The entrance to the tenant space will be located off the parking lot, which is north of the building. According to their application, Brew Fitness is a boutique studio fitness offering small group fitness classes and personal training. Part of what makes Brew Fitness a social fitness community experience is the local craft beer available on tap at each location. The village board approved a Class B beer license on June 21st, 2021. This will be the second area location for Brew Fitness, which has operated in Milwaukee's Walker's Point neighborhood since 2017. The business will operate 7 days a week from 5 a.m. to 7 p.m. on weekdays and 8 a.m. to 12 p.m. noon on weekends. Peak hours are expected to be 5 a.m. to 7 a.m. and 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. 3 to 7 employees will be employed with at least 2 working per shift. As many as 10 to 25 customers may be expected per hour. The applicant has indicated that no noise, odor, glare, dust, fire hazard, or smoke will be associated with the occupancy. In order to confirm that noise does not emanate from the business, staff is recommending that as a condition of approval, all doors and windows shall remain closed during operations. Parking per 535-50 code provisions related to required parking facilities shall only apply to new buildings or structures and substantially altered buildings or structures. The proposed occupancy does not qualify for either. Per 535-47C, commercial recreational uses require one parking space per every 4 persons at maximum capacity, which equates to 7, plus 1 space per employee, 2 per shift. As a result, 9 parking spaces would be required per code. The applicant has indicated an abundance of available nearby street and public parking available across the street to easily accommodate traffic. It is noted that many customers may walk or bike from nearby. This is just an overview of the entrance to the proposed fitness studio, as well as a floor plan. Review and approval per 535-25C or 535-25, the Village Plan Commission shall review the site, existing and proposed structures, architectural plans and neighboring uses, parking areas, driveway locations, highway access, traffic generation and circulation, drainage, sewerage and water systems, and the proposed operation. Conditions such as landscaping, architectural design, type of construction, construction commencement and completion dates, sureties, lighting, fencing, planting screens, operational controls, hours of operation, improved traffic circulation, deed restrictions, highway access restrictions, increased yards or parking requirements may be required by the Village Commission upon its finding that these are necessary to fulfill the purpose and intent of the chapter. Per 535-25C, no conditional use permit shall be authorized by the Plan Commission unless the Plan Commission shall find that the following 7 conditions, which I have on your screen here, have been reviewed. Staff comment: based on the review of the application and existing site conditions, staff has no objections to the proposed operations, subject to confirmation that the doors and windows will not be open during operations. And that is the conclusion of the staff overview.
Hey, isn't it?
Thank you, Director Griepentrag. All right, at this time, I'd like to open the public hearing at 7:40. Are there any members of the public who would like to be heard on this matter? You can use the raise hand function, or you can unmute yourself, and I will ask Director Griepentrag to help me monitor that.
I am not seeing anyone with their hands raised, and I did not receive additional comment since the publication of the staff report.
Okay, I'm just going to wait a few more seconds in case people are struggling with their computer controls. All right, seeing and hearing no public comment at this time, I will close the public hearing at 6:41, I'm sorry. And at this time, we can move to Plan Commission deliberation. So I'd like to open it up to the Plan Commission. We can take questions and clarification regarding the overview. Oh, and the applicant is here. Is that right?
I actually do not see him on the call.
Okay. Okay. Great. Since he's not here, let's go on with our deliberation.
I can do a motion.
Oh,
I have a
Commissioner Kylie Miller, did you want to speak?
I did, and I'm not sure if Bart can answer these questions, if you got enough information from the applicant. Besides closing the windows and doors or keeping them closed, do you know about any other soundproofing that they plan to put in so that the tenants on the second floor or next door don't have sound traveling to them?
I am not aware of any specific soundproofing that's been proposed. I did speak with Building Inspector Justin Burris, and he indicated the building of its age is quite solid, and he did not expect that noise would emanate beyond the building. Within the building, I think that'd be a matter, once again, for property management, if that is a problem with the tenant above. But noise beyond the property line is typically what we're concerned with. And it was his professional opinion from a building inspection standpoint that the building was quite solid, and that just as long as the doors and windows were closed, rather, that he did not feel like it would be a problem.
Okay. The reason I asked is my massage therapist for the last 15 years is on the second floor. And, when you're trying to get blissed out during a massage, the beat of music or exercise equipment might put a damper on that. So that's why I asked that. The occupancy on the floor plan for that big room says 38, but they're only planning to have 10 to 25 customers. So again, my question was going to be, is most of that space going to be filled up with exercise equipment, or so is their actual capacity 25 then?
Yeah, capacity is limited by access to restrooms for commercial occupancy. So once again, the building inspector will confirm the actual capacity. It will not be related to equipment that's in there or whatnot. That would be up to them to move around, if they need it for larger classes, or to bring it forward if they want to use it in the middle. Occupancy is, like I said, controlled by access to restrooms primarily.
Okay, and my last question, Bart, maybe you can answer too. Since condition number 1 includes safety, I was curious how it has worked at their first location with the mixing of the beer taps with the exercise equipment. Is like the beer available after you have your workout? Or, I just wanted to know more about how that worked. Did he or she explain that to you?
Yeah, it wasn't explained specifically that I recall, but I do remember listening to Village Board discussion of the liquor license. I believe that a tap beer is available after your workout, so it'd be kind of like a congratulatory refreshment, I think, for lack of better phrase, my understanding of how the beer interplays with the workouts.
I didn't want to assume that. I just thought I would ask. All right, thanks so much.
And I can also add that during the discussion of the liquor license at Village Board, we did confirm that they won't be serving beer in the 5 a.m. hours that morning.
Can I make a point of privilege? Can we remind folks again to turn off their microphones, please? It's kind of difficult to hear.
Thank you, Commissioner Kudo. It's a good reminder. Thank you. Okay, at this time, I would entertain a motion or further questions.
I'll make a
Commissioner
motion.
Wickland?
Yeah, I'll make a motion. I move to approve the conditional use permit application for the proposed fitness studio at commercial property 3514 North Oakland Avenue based on meeting the conditions stipulated in 535-25C.
I'll second.
Okay, motion made by Commissioner Wickland, seconded by Mr. Kudo, or Commissioner Kudo. At this time, I'd like to hear from commissioners as to whether they are in favor or opposed to the motion on the floor, maybe citing any one of the 7 factors.
I'm in favor of it. I don't have any objections based on the 7 factors.
Okay.
And same with me. I'm in favor.
I feel like the overview and the application were it's very thorough, and it's conducive to the space that it's occupying in terms of there are other health and wellness providers in that building. All right, well, at this time, hearing no other comments, I would like to do a roll call vote.
President McKay,
Yes.
Trustee Bockhorst,
Yes.
Eric Kudo,
Yes.
Barbara Kiley Miller,
Yes,
Therese Klein,
Yes.
Josh Pollock,
Yes.
Dan Wickland.
Yes.
Okay, so motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Moving on to item number 4, we have another conditional use application for a massage provider at 4433 North Oakland. We will have the same format, overview by Director Griepentrag, followed by public hearing, followed by Plan Commission deliberation. Director Griepentrag?
Yes, and for reference, I do believe that the applicant is on the call for this one, so I'll give my overview, and if I'm missing anything, I'd invite her to fill us in as well. Let me pull this back up. Wrong way. So what is before us then is a conditional use permit for Cream City Physical Therapy at 4433 North Oakland Avenue. Project and parcel overview: Hillary Jackson, PT, DPT of Cream City Physical Therapy and Wellness, has applied to operate a physical therapy and massage therapy business in therapy room number 1 within 4433 North Oakland Avenue. The property is zoned B2 mixed use residential district. The B2 mixed use residential district is intended to provide opportunities for mixed use development while encouraging residential development. The district allows buildings of exclusively residential use as well as mixed use buildings with residential uses on the upper floors and retail, office, service, or restaurant uses on the first floor. Buildings of exclusively commercial use are not permitted. The district will allow for additional shopping opportunities while adding residents and vitality to the village. As presently developed and utilized, the buildings exclusively occupied by commercial uses, which is considered to be an existing legal non-conforming, but should not impact this application since the non-conformity is not expanding or being enlarged. Massage therapy is not specifically listed with permitted, conditional, nor prohibited uses defined within the zoning chapter of the Village of Shorewood Code based on 535-10B uses unclassified. In the event that there is a question as to the classification of a use, the question shall be submitted to the Plan Commission for determination. Any use not specifically listed or as either permitted or prohibited use shall be considered a conditional use if the Plan Commission determines that the use is substantially similar to a permitted use or an existing conditional use in that district. Staff believes this use to be consistent with that of a clinic, which per 535-27D is allowed to operate within the B1, B2, B3, and B5 districts as a conditional use, subject to the review and approval of the Plan Commission after a public hearing. The parcel is currently developed with a 7,674 square foot, 2-story multi-tenant commercial building containing approximately 6 other tenants. The parcel also has approximately 20 surface level parking spaces on the front, side, and rear of the building that are shared amongst various users who offer similar therapy and wellness services. No interior or exterior modifications to the building or lot are proposed with this application. Proposed operations. The applicant is proposing to establish a physical and massage therapy practice with up to 4 employees in this space. The operations would be an expansion from existing services offered at 5211 North Avenue in Milwaukee, and the website of the existing services has been provided at creamcityptandwellness.com. Those services include massage therapy, find your peace massage, craniosacral therapy, energy healing, and physical therapy. All practitioners are licensed through the state of Wisconsin. Cream City Physical Therapy and Wellness, which expects to treat 7 to 14 patients per day, would occupy a single treatment room on the first floor within a larger tenant space occupied by Forever Young Anti-Aging and Weight Loss Center. Per 22520C3A, all individual businesses within Shorewood require a commercial occupancy permit, which triggers zoning review and the resultant conditional use classification. The single room is approximately 150 square feet in size and will be used exclusively for physical and massage therapy. Only 1 or 2 employees will be present at a time. The business is proposed to be open 7 days a week from 8 a.m. to 7 p.m. by appointment. Parking. Per 53550, code provisions related to required parking facilities shall only apply to new buildings or structures and substantially altered buildings or structures. The proposed occupancy does not qualify for either. For 53547D6, medical and dental offices require 4 spaces per practitioner, plus 1 space for each additional employee at the time of greatest number of employees present. Based on the proposed operation, this would require 4 off-street parking stalls. Approximately 20 shared off-street parking spaces are provided on the site, in addition to on-street parking and transit access. Review and approval. Per 53525, the Village Plan Commission shall review the site, existing and proposed structures, architectural plans, neighboring uses, parking areas, driveway locations, highway access, traffic generation and circulation, drainage, sewerage, and water systems, and the proposed operation. Conditions such as landscaping, architectural design, type of construction, construction commencement and completion dates, sureties, lighting, fencing, planting screens, operational controls, hours of operation, improved traffic circulation, deed restrictions, highway access restrictions, increased yards or parking requirements may be required by the Village Plan Commission upon its finding that these are necessary to fulfill the purpose and intent of this chapter. Furthermore, per 53525C, no conditional use permit will be authorized by the Plan Commission unless such commission finds the following 7 conditions applicable. Staff comment. Based on review of the application and existing site conditions, staff has no objections to proposed operations. That is the conclusion of the staff report. As I mentioned, I believe the applicant is on the call. If she has anything to add or clarify from my presentation, I'd be happy to have that as well.
I do not have anything to add.
Thank you. President McKeag.
I'm sorry. I was muted. I forgot. Attorney Baird, is there anything you'd like to add? I forgot to ask you that on the previous item.
Thank you. No, I think the body has evaluated these particular requests many times, and Bart did an excellent job of going through the referencing the 53525C elements to be evaluated. So I really have nothing additional. No questions. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, at this time, I would entertain a motion or questions pertaining to the matter.
We need a public hearing, actually, President McKeag.
I think you're muted, President McKeag, or I can't hear you.
If she's
The public would like to be heard. Who would like to be heard on this matter? I don't see any hands raised. I see one microphone unmuted. DJW, would you like to speak?
My hand is not up. My hand is not up.
Okay. Thank you. All right. If anyone else would like to be
Unfortunately, President McKeag, I think you cut out again.
Public hearing at 6:55 PM. And at this time, we can move on to Plan Commission discussion and deliberation. I would entertain a motion or questions.
I think you cut out there for just a moment there, just for the record. I think you were just noting the times for the opening and the closing of the public hearing. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. And did you get those for the minutes? Got it. Okay.
Thank you. I would entertain a motion or questions at this time from the commission.
I'll make a motion. I move to approve the proposed physical therapy, massage therapy business at commercial property 4433 North Oakland Avenue.
I'll second.
Okay, motion by Commissioner Wickland, seconded by Commissioner Klein. Is there any discussion related to the 7 factors?
Yeah.
Bart's raising his hand.
They were really.
Yeah, I apologize. I didn't include it in my memo, but I typically do say based on meeting the conditions stipulated in 53525C. If there's an objection to adding that, or is that a friendly amendment that you could be willing to provide?
You can amend my motion to add that.
Apologies for not having that in there.
You know I need it word for word, so.
Any other discussion among the commissioners? Hearing none, we could take a roll call at this point.
President McKeag,
Yes.
Trustee Bachhorst,
Aye.
Dan Wickland,
Aye.
Josh Pollock,
Yes.
Therese Klein,
Yes.
Barbara Kylie Miller,
Yes.
Eric Kudo.
Yes.
Okay, motion carries. Hillary, welcome to Shorewood.
Thank you very much for having me. If you need a
Best of
massage,
luck.
look me up.
I know. I hope to make your acquaintance that way. It's
Good.
great.
Thank you.
All right. All right, moving on to item 5. We have a special exception parking application from Wimmer Communities at 44 for the site located at 4414 North Oakland. I will acknowledge to the commission that this parking exception relates very closely to the discussion on item 6, modifications of chapter 535. I discussed with Bart whether we should take one or the other first. The applicant was interested in being considered tonight, but with the understanding that we are also looking to modify, there is a possibility that we will modify the zoning code related to this exception. So for that reason, in our typical procedure, we put applications first. We will take item 5 as listed on the agenda. So I just wanted to let you know that. So we have an overview from staff.
President McKeag, I think you cut out again. Oh, yep.
You know what, Bart? I'd like to move for a 7-minute recess. And I say this because I'm in transit and I can take over the meeting from a secure source in 7 minutes.
So we rededicated
If she doesn't get back.
Okay, can you hear me?
Now we can.
Commissioner Kudo, did you want to be recognized?
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion to postpone agenda item number 5 until our next scheduled meeting.
I'll second.
Is there a
that
second?
motion. I'll second that motion.
Okay, we have a motion to defer, seconded by Commissioner Kudo, seconded by Commissioner Kylie Miller. I'd like to open that for discussion at this time.
President McKay?
Yes, Trustee Bachhorst?
Okay, I'd like to speak, but I'm gonna need a few minutes, so let someone else go forward. But I just wanted to make sure you were aware of that.
Thank you. Okay, Commissioner Kudo?
Yeah, I mean, I just, we have agenda item number 6, which directly affects agenda item number 5. This is yet another parking special exception. I know that the neighbors were notified, I believe, late last week. This agenda was put forth at about 3:45 on a Friday. So not including the weekends, this has been, 48 hours or so, less than 48 hours or so of actual work hours that residents have had to digest this and to look at the plan and to make comments. I've heard from a number of residents. I live nearby, but I've heard from a number of residents who are just now hearing about this. Certainly a lot of parents who have children that are walking to Lake Bluff every day and would be directly affected, positive or negative. But I think that this is an important corner in Shorewood. I think that, we all know that it's going to be redeveloped. I just think that we owe it to the community to give them more than 48 hours to put together their thoughts on this. And so I would ask that, in order to make sure that we hear from everybody that wants to be heard, that we postpone this until our next meeting, so that 1, we can hear what we need to hear from the residents, but 2, we also are able to discuss agenda item number 6, which directly pertains to this. So that's the reasoning behind my motion.
Thank you. Other comments from the commissioners?
President McKay, from what I read in the packet, this is Barbara speaking, it looks like our last parking exception for the property on Stoll and Capitol is being appealed again. Is that correct, Bart? It was both in that chart that you had. Right, and so I think, that's just another reason for us to take a look at what we want our parking zoning code to be before considering agenda item number 5. And can I ask, to whom is it going? To the Board of Appeals again, that last decision?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
President McKay?
Yes, Trustee Bachhorst?
Yes, I have a couple of questions regarding that appeals process that Ms. Kylie Miller brought up. And also, when was it that the article was written in the journal? I mean, this has been in discussion for quite some time, this projected, this proposal. So I understand that, Eric Kudo has some issues with his neighbors being notified and whatnot. But anyway, that's an aside. But regarding the appeals process, is it the same person or group of individuals appealing yet again over on Prospect and Stoll?
It is. Yes, it's the same type of appeal from the same entity.
Okay, so it's not like a new group or organization is, appealing that. It's the same person that's objected to the entire project from the get-go. So I'm not really sure. Sounds to me kind of, Barb, like he doesn't want it to happen, but I could be misreading the tea leaves there. But but regardless, so we're here tonight. We have this in front of us. We've all known this is coming. The public has been notified. I think, in fact, it's actually a really great process, if memory is serving correctly, regarding that how the neighborhood was notified. etc. We followed all rules and regulations as a municipality. And quite frankly, I really have only gotten 2 or 3, and the same ones that you guys have received, objections to this. And they were not necessarily to this particular item in general. Actually, I don't even think, one was just to parking changes in general. So I'm not, anyway, I'm not understanding why we would delay this. We have a lot of business in this village. We've had a lot of deferred business in this village. So I'm really not.
Okay, thank you, Trustee Bockhorst. Are there any other comments regarding this motion, the motion to defer?
I'm still newer on the commission. Can you just walk me through the process that we typically take for the notification of residents and like what the normal timelines are for that kind of stuff, Bart? And if that's not an appropriate request, I can withdraw it.
Sure.
Commissioner Pollock, I did not hear your request.
Repeated, I was asking Bart to walk me through the process that we use for notifying residents of like being impacted and what the normal like timelines are for that and what happened in this case.
Yes, I would. Yeah, Bart, could you, because we actually, based on feedback from the past, we actually did notify the neighbors where our zoning code has not been updated to require that yet, but we did in this case delivered letters by hand. Bart, would you like to explain it?
Correct. So the current requirements for the review of a special exception are within the Village Code 53551. It just says the Plan Commission upon application as required herein may grant a special exception to the provisions of the requirement of this article. It actually does not include any specific notice requirements. Within item number 6 later tonight, we will discuss whether or not the Plan Commission and Village would like to change that. For reference, for conditional use permits, we are required by state statutes to publish the application twice, the notice of the application twice in the newspaper, as well as to provide a mailed notice to owners of record within 200 feet of the application. That is not required of the special exception. So historically, we have not done that. As a matter of courtesy and as a learning lesson from the previous consideration, we did voluntarily hand deliver letters on Friday after the agenda was posted last Tuesday. So we posted the agenda on Tuesday, so it was officially publicly noticed that this would be considered 1 week from that date. And then later in the week on Friday, I believe the building inspectors did hand deliver notice of the meeting to properties within 200 feet of the application.
Bart,
Okay,
when those letters go out, do they go out both to residential and commercial neighbors and like 200 feet in each direction?
Correct. They were delivered to the commercial tenants as well as the residential properties. It's 200 feet from the property as measured by our GIS system. There's an address label that it creates.
All right. So for us math impaired people, like how many houses is 200 feet? Is that like half a block or a third of the block? What does that look like?
I believe approximately 60 notices were provided based on the map that was generated. So yes, a half a block I think probably might be accurate, but it was 60 notices specifically I think that were printed out for maybe 58 actual addresses that appeared.
Okay, thank you.
I have a point of information. Bart, at what time on Friday? You said that you hand delivered those letters after the agenda went out. What time did the agenda go out on Friday afternoon?
The agenda was posted last Tuesday. The materials were added to the agenda, I want to say at 4 o'clock, 3:30 or 4 o'clock. The letters were hand delivered, I believe, mid-morning, Crystal, or early afternoon.
They were hand delivered, I would say probably between 11 and 1. The guys split them up and each of them took a pack.
Thank you.
and I would just like to take this opportunity to thank the planning department for responding to my request that be done.
Thank you for asking for that, President McKay. That's really above and beyond. So I appreciate that. I'm sure the neighbors do as well.
All right, any other discussion related to this motion before we take a vote?
Sure, I've got something. Although I like seeing Eric agitated, I think
I'm not agitated.
I think in general he's got a good point here. Although we followed the process, and I think President McKay, that was a great idea to hand deliver those letters. I think some of the resistance we encountered, although it didn't let up with the next meeting, was residents felt like they didn't have enough time to react. So, I typically like to knock some of these things out, especially since we're virtual and no one had to travel for this one. I think it's not a bad idea to punt it till next meeting till we can knock it out and residents can provide more feedback if they want. And for the record, maybe you're not agitated, Eric. Sorry.
I'm right as rain, my friend. I'm good. I just think it's important that we give folks an opportunity to be heard. We've come across this many times as commissioners where folks feel like they are getting information last minute. And this is not a small development. I think it could be a great development. I just think that people should have an opportunity to put their positions out there and ask questions of the developers and of us as it relates to traffic patterns or pedestrian patterns or what have you. I just think that 1 month to allow folks to do that is not asking too much of this body.
Trustee Bockhorst, I see your hand is raised.
Yeah, so I'm just curious because Eric, you said you live over on that block. Have you communicated with any of the residents and stuff like that? Because I find I'd be shocked, given that you've known about this for a while. I'm not saying it's your responsibility, and I appreciate what Mr. Wickman said as well. We hear this all the time. Like the number one thing we hear is we need more time. We need more time, and at some point we don't. And I'm not opposed to perhaps discussing this another time, but I wouldn't say a month. I think that's unfair. This isn't a new thing. This isn't like we've sprung this on. There've been plenty of articles in the newspaper. We've been having ongoing discussions, not only about the other project, the Sunseekers project, but also about changing the parking code. There's been robust commentary on a variety of formats. This is not a new thing. So it's always, yes, we want to have transparency. I'd like transparency from all of the members of this board as well, of this commission. We want to have enough public input and public notice. And I wouldn't say this isn't like I've been on the board since 2013, and we had a robust amount of development in the earlier years of that. And it's amazing how some projects, for example, the Metro Market, you will have a lot of people because for a variety of reasons. And then there will be projects that kind of went through same amount of public notice, often similar hurdles and whatnot that didn't what's it called, result in the same level of feedback. Now I understand that the same group from the other project is appealing. And with that, we've had a lot of contact, we've had a lot of discourse, we've had a lot of notice. This is not like this project just came up and it was plunked on the agenda. We've all known about this for a while. And in fact, I've heard from many people. And maybe it's just because I'm really social and active in the community, I'm not sure. But I am not, and I'm not going to support postponing this a month this evening. I think that we have responsibilities to the community. We have responsibilities to ourselves and each other. And we have responsibilities to staff here. Everyone has followed the rules. No one has fast-tracked, shortchanged, or done anything aberrant. So if we are going to postpone this because we don't want to make a decision, well, then we're going to still have to make a decision in a month. And the community has had time to react. And it also won't stop here. This still, if this were to go forward tonight, this would still need to go through the through other the design and review board, etc. But, so I'm just gonna say that I think we should vote. I mean, I don't want to take away the other rights of other members of this commission that may have, you know, an opinion. But this is not, we're not doing anything unusual here. In fact, it sounds like staff went above and beyond.
Trustee
notify
McKay,
people.
pardon me. President McKay, Trustee Bockhorst asked me a question. Am I allowed to answer, or do you want me to wait?
I guess I would like to, there are two people in the audience, members of the public that have their hands raised. So I'd like to take all the comments before we, but you can answer, sure.
I was asked whether or not I had talked to any residents, and I will tell you that I had a number of residents reach out to me today who were just finding out about this. Residents that I now see are on this Zoom meeting, saying that this was the first time that they heard about this. So while, you know, members of this commission or members of the board or folks who are more social than myself in this district may have heard about what was going on with this development, that doesn't mean that the members of this community have. They have other things that they're doing. They have other responsibilities. And so, you know, to put forth this agenda with all of the items in it, that's over 200 pages on a Friday, you know, mid to late morning, early afternoon, whatever it is, and expect the residents of this village to read that, digest it, and put together any questions that they might have and clear their calendar for Tuesday night, I think is asking too much. And I think that we know it's asking too much, which is why we have agenda item number 6, which is why you ask staff to put out that bit of information, because the process that we have doesn't work. And so I think that it's incumbent on us to take a month, figure this process out, make sure that the residents of this community are able to voice their opinions and address this in August. I don't think
Thank
that
you.
is beyond.
Okay.
President McKay?
My observation is that the commissioners are starting to repeat themselves. So I'm going to go to comments from the public.
President McKay,
I see Mr. Hill, excuse me?
can I just ask a question?
Commissioner Wickland?
Can we take public comment on this right now? I'm just wondering, maybe we can. I mean, I don't know, but I'm just wondering.
We can always take public comment.
Okay.
This is a motion that it's not related to an agenda item. Attorney Bear, is there any barrier to us taking public?
No, it's up to the body. You have a motion on the floor that's been seconded, and you've been discussing and debating. And while there's no compelling, there's no legal, anything legally compelling you to do so, if you find that it's appropriate, it's absolutely appropriate.
Okay. I saw Mr. Hill, Mr. Lean, and Ms. Maisie with their hands up. So let's go in that order if you don't mind.
Oh, hi. Yeah, my name's Pete. I live directly across the, can everyone hear me?
Oh, yes. And Mr. Hill, I should remind members of the public, please state your name and your address for the record, if you will.
Sure. Pete
Thank you. I forgot.
Yeah, no problem. 1815 East Lake Bluff, right across the street. I just wanted to thank Eric for his comment. I agree with that. I would like to see the site developed, but even though I try to stay on top of what's going on, obviously it's very close to us. This notice was the first time I became aware of the proposal. I didn't see the article in the Journal Sentinel, and so I just think there are a lot of issues that we just sort of need to consider. I definitely feel ill-prepared to really provide any comments because I just started to look at this. So, I would appreciate a little more time to actually just digest it, but thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Andy Lean?
Yeah, hi. So my name is Andy Lane. I live at 4406 North Murray Avenue. So I don't know, maybe 200 yards from the corner of Lake Bluff and Oakland. And yeah, this is the reason that I'm here is because my wife showed me a Facebook post, I think from the PTO, that she happened to notice like right as this meeting was started. Otherwise, I had no idea that this was being proposed. And I didn't see the article in the Journal Sentinel. It's not because I'm not interested in what happens there. Like, I've got 3 kids that go to Lake Bluff, walk past it every day during the school year, and have been very interested in what is going to become of the abandoned bank that, you know, we've been walking past for 2 years now, or however long it's been. But I don't know anything about what's proposed here. It's important to me to be able to like have an opportunity to weigh in on that, because this is this is something that my kids will be contending with every day as they come to and from school, go to Lake Bluff to play on the playground, you know, all that stuff. So I'd really like to have an opportunity to understand what's happening and to weigh in as an affected citizen about it. So I don't really feel very prepared to do that tonight. So I guess I would support having some more time for the community to be able to weigh in. I've got neighbors that also have kids that go to Lake Bluff that don't know anything about this.
Mm-hmm. Ms. Macy or Massey?
Yes, Maisie, thank you. This is Lisa Maisie and Mark Gardner, and we're at 1816 East Lake Bluff. We are immediately adjacent to this parking lot. We just got notice of this we just moved in February, so we're kind of out of the loop about a lot of what was going on with that site. And so we got the notice on our porch on Friday. We noticed public comment was due Monday by 3 p.m. And as was noted before, the packet for this meeting was hundreds of pages long, and a lot of it was the very comprehensive information from the Wimmer Company, which has not left us a lot of time to look at that and digest it. So as the most immediately affected by this, at least of the 3 of us that have spoken, we would really appreciate the extra time to digest it and respond to it. And I don't know if Mark, in writing, yes, we'd prefer to do that in writing. I don't know if Mark has anything else to add.
Hi, I'm the other homeowner at 1816, and just to say that although there's a whole larger issue of planning approval and all that, there is already a significant parking challenge on Lake Bluff. There's parking only on one side of the street in this block. It's already crowded, and the suggestions that were made by the developer that these people who are going to be renting these $2,000 a month apartments might not have cars is ridiculous. So we'd like time just to go and respond in writing.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to, I'm sorry.
Understood. Although you're breaking up and can't quite hear you.
You're on mute, Ann.
If we open that item, we can take public comment related to that.
Okay.
President McKay, everything you said, we didn't catch until the last bit of your sentence. Can you?
Okay, I apologize. I apologize for interrupting. I just wanted to remind people that the motion on the table is whether to defer the item number 5, not so any opinions regarding that application really should be held unless we are debating that. Ms. Beakley, and I am starting to hear repeats of comments, so I'm not sure that that's going to help the commission. Remember, we're just deciding whether to defer this item. So,
And also point of parliamentary procedure, Ms. McKay, I do have items to say before we go into, because as a body, we are allowed to speak our minds here. So I'd like to be called on after the public.
I understand that.
My name's Elizabeth Beagley. I live at 2413 East Shorewood Boulevard. My comment is about, I think you should defer part of the problem which happened over with the other parking exception on Capitol was that people felt it was, I know that Trustee Bockhorst is very informed about what's happening in our community, but often the community members aren't. We have a lot of other issues going on. And when you put this, they feel like it's been thrown at them. And so working with the community, giving them time will help them feel heard and understood. And any concerns, you know, we're not just pushing something through quickly. I mean, Trustee Bockhorst says it's been on the table for years, or how long. For me, I just heard about it a few weeks ago. And so, you know, and I'm a planner and I know this, you know, these things. So just to help people feel comfortable, let's not rush things. Take our time and make sure people feel informed, and that our commissioners and our trustees and our president are listening to us, because we elected you and you're working for us. That's all. Thank you.
Mr. Schrader or Schroeder?
That's actually Schrader. It's David Schrader.
Schrader.
I live at 1819 East Lake Bluff, and I feel many of the same feelings that have been spoken by Eric and people in support of his position. I won't reiterate them, but I want to just say two things. One, parking has been a major issue for the 25 years I've lived here. This has been a topic that has been discussed often. So I do think that it's important to take time to really understand this exception. And the other thing I just wanted to state is that while there's a comment that there wasn't a lot of feedback, and we've known for 3 days to provide feedback during the summer, calendars being what they are, it is completely unreasonable in my view to put something out on a Friday and expect responses on Tuesday and view the lack of responses by Tuesday as an indication that people are supporting it. Thank you.
I'm going to return to Trustee Bockhorst. Do you have something different to say? With all due respect.
So, just a couple of things, and I think my fellow commissioners should know this. Yes, the packet is comprehensive. So what we have this time is that we have a developer that gave us a very, very detailed plan. What we are being asked this evening to weigh in on, I'm sorry, there's a lot of background noise. I don't know who's connecting to audio and stuff. Okay, thank you. Do you all know what we're being asked to decide this evening? It's not the whole plans. It's not we're being asked to talk about parking. Okay, so the fact that the developer provided us with very comprehensive plan, very well detailed, really lots of information. It's not like this is discovery and we're in a court case and we have to sift through boxes and stuff. You know, that we shouldn't be punishing people for being very thorough. This is what the community wants. And I understand that, you know, maybe people want to digest and look at it, but that's not the mission of this evening's meeting, is not to go through all 200 and some pages of this and go through every point. We're talking about parking variance, and we're talking about something that we all discussed. I know Mr. Kudo, his internet didn't work at the last meeting, so he wasn't there, but it's something that we all discussed as a commission. And also, you know, I will take a little bit of stock in some of the comments here that were made by some of the public, including the fact that if you give more time, people will feel like they're understood. We are having that last decision appealed by the same complainant. This is what, how many times now? So that's been going on for months and months. So I understand that there are some people here tonight, and this is just, by the way, this is how these things always go. There's always, we need more time. We need more time. And I don't know how much time you continuously give. If we are going to postpone this, then I would say it's incumbent upon us as commissioners to take our charge seriously, and we have a special meeting. And when we get this decided, because if we're gonna set this precedent, we can always say we need more time. That is the number one thing you always hear in these situations when And I understand, I want to appeal. I want to say that I understand from residents that if you are just hearing about it now, it will seem like this was rushed. But then what happens in 1 week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks when some people are just hearing about it? And then they feel like they were not given enough time. And it goes ad infinitum. But at the end of the day, we have a serious charge here, you guys. And I understand that we want to be respectful and responsible, and I believe we are doing that. Thank you.
I'd like to ask the commission if they're ready to take a vote on the motion to defer. Commissioner Kylie Miller, is that a yes, or you want to be heard?
I'd like to be heard. Thank you.
You want to allow the developers to speak since they're here too, or?
Just a couple of things quickly, President McKay. As far as who we have a responsibility to, it's the residents. As much as I appreciate staff, our responsibility is to the residents, those who elect you and those who we are appointed to serve. I don't think we would have heard about this except that somehow the news media got wind of it and Bart had to send them the development proposal. But otherwise, the full packet was not available until Friday for us either. So again, those of you who are elected officials might have been in more discussions about what was coming, but we did not. And considering it's kind of like we're putting the cart before the horse. We're deciding on a big development project before we decide what we want our parking zoning code to be. So it's just a little bit backwards, both on the agenda as well as the timing. And I don't think that we should have a special meeting. I think even the village board cuts back their meetings during the summer. So scheduling this for our next regular meeting in August will give all parties enough time to get their questions in a row, to read over whatever they want to read over, to respond as they'd like to. And I think then we would be good to go. Thank you.
Commissioner Kylie Miller, I'd like to make I disagree. Actually, when the reporters asked for the application, at that time, I asked Bart to share it with the rest of the Plan Commission. So we did receive that earlier than Friday. And then the rest of the packet, the rest of the packet was available. You still make your point stands, but I did just want it for the record to say that that's not 100% accurate. Is an oversight. So
yeah,
I will.
Got the whole thing. I don't think we got like.
We did. We got this. We got it related to item 5, and that's what's the only pages of the packet that relate to item 5 is page 160 through 210. No, actually, not even. Anyway, it doesn't matter. I would like to know if the commission is ready to take a vote on the motion before us.
I think we have one more public comment. I'd like to hear it, please.
I don't see. Oh.
TJW.
Oh, who could that be?
Okay. Mr. Walsh.
Hello, everyone. This is Daniel Walsh. I live at 4024 North Stowell Avenue. And we did, I was part of the group that filed the appeal. The reason we filed the appeal in the first instance is because this board acted without providing any information to the neighbors directly affected. The reason we filed the second appeal is because the board acted on demonstrably false information and inapplicable information that was supposedly substantial evidence that the development would be not detrimental to all the neighbors. So the idea that you would settle down, not try to get this done days after 200 pages of information gets sent out, that you'd go through it so the neighbors felt like they were represented by their volunteer boards and their elected boards, so that we could get good developments, so that we could all support the actions that you take. That's a really good idea. Because if you don't do that, the opposite is going to happen. you've already undermined your credibility so substantially with the neighbors in our area that you're just going to do it with the neighbors in Lake Bluff. And with all due respect, Trustee Bockhorst, you really need to be a little bit more professional about how you respond to all of the people on social media. Stick to the facts.
Dan?
You just want to stick to the facts.
Mr. Walsh?
Yeah, Mr. Walsh.
I would ask that you take any issues with Trustee Bockhorst directly outside of this meeting or anyone else on the commission.
She is an active participant. She very vociferously and
Mr. Walsh. Mr. Walsh.
Yes.
Mr. Walsh, thank you for your comments. I'm going to move on. At this time, I'd like to ask the commission to take a vote on the motion before us. I'd like to take a vote on the motion before us.
Read the motion again, Crystal.
Oh. I believe Eric's motion was simply to defer the item to the August meeting.
It wasn't anything fancy, Dan. It was just that.
Just to defer it to the August Planning Commission.
I didn't have any written notes from Bart. I couldn't go off anything. I just had to make it up on my own.
Pretty impressed.
Impressive.
Well done.
President McCaig, do you want a roll call on this?
Yes, I would. Thank you, Crystal.
Okay. Eric Kudo?
Yes.
Barbara Kylie Miller?
Yes.
Therese Klein?
I have a question. Can I abstain? Do I have to say yes or no?
You can abstain.
I'll abstain.
Josh Pollock?
Yes.
Dan Wicklund?
Yes.
Trustee Bockhorst?
No.
President McCaig?
Yes. Okay, so the motion passes. We will defer the item to the August, I don't know the date offhand, but our August meeting. Would you be able to, should we just note? Okay, so the August 24th, 2021 meeting. Okay. Commissioner Kudo, did you have something?
I just wanted to say thank you, for the conversation and the community comments. I didn't know I was going to do this when this meeting started, but thank you everybody for being cool about it and just having the good discussion.
Yeah, I will take this opportunity. I was going to do it during comments, but I forgot. I am going to take this opportunity to advise the members of the public and the commissioners, the members of the public who are on this call this evening, that we all work together to share information with the people that need it, to encourage the people that receive the information, to ask questions, to contact staff and ask questions so that you're responding to the right information. Anyone on this call who is not signed up for the village manager's memo, please go to the website immediately and sign up for that, because this was also in the manager's memo last week. Please remember to read the packet. You don't need to read the whole packet if you're not interested in every item on the agenda. You just need to review the application and the memo, the staff report associated with it. And also, please be advised that yes?
Go ahead, I'm sorry, I didn't know you.
Please be advised. Yeah, please be advised that the item before, the application before us is a special request exception for parking. It is not in favor of the developer or not. The development is being proposed by people who own that land, and it's designed to code, so they're not asking for any use issues, or it's not a conditional use, and it is not any type of variance on any code other than our current parking ratio. So just keep that in mind, because I will be pretty strict about comments when we take this up in a month. So since you've had time to learn, I'm going to have everybody do their homework just like we do.
President
And you'll
McKay.
be experts. You will be experts in a month. Yes, Trustee Bockhorst.
It looks like, so we do have the developers here and they have their hand up.
Mhm.
So
Okay.
we didn't allow them to have comment before, but I would
Okay.
say that I would be only fair.
Yes.
I'd like to hear what they have to say.
Attorney, thank you, Trustee Bockhorst. Attorney Bear, is there any issue with hearing from the developers since we're not in an active, we don't have an item open on the table?
Well, there was already a motion taken and passed, but the next agenda item also relates to the parking ratios. Are they interrelated? I guess that's for your discretion.
Yeah.
You could also.
I would ask it, Trustee Bockhorst, hold on. Let's just get through this. Representatives from Wimmer Communities, do you want to ask any questions related to the deferred motion, the motion to defer?
Sorry. Well, good evening. My name is Mark Wimmer, President of Wimmer Communities. Nick Wimmer, John Wimmer, and Dave Wimmer. We have obviously been watching the events within the village and have in fact tried to work with the timing of such so that you were ready for this proposal to come forward to. Unfortunately, by delaying it a week, we are unable to attend on that date because of prior commitments. So we deferred and delayed submittal of this in order to be able to work with the discussion to date. We're very excited about the project and coming to the village of Shorewood. However, the deferral tonight till August 24th, essentially, we are unable to present on that evening.
Point of information, President McKay.
Yes.
And this is a point of information directed at Wimmer. May I ask them a question?
No.
Yes. Well, this is the Trustee Bockhorst.
The vote then. Let's
Point of order. I have a question before the president, Trustee Bockhorst. I'm sure the president is more than capable of answering my question without your interference.
Could you direct the question to me and then I'll decide? I really want to observe what our process is.
That's fine. They said that they held the application and they put it forth for this meeting specifically. I'm wondering if, because I've had no conversations with them, if they've had other conversations with members of this commission regarding this development, or are we all getting all of this information at the same time?
All at the same time.
So no, I can't ask them, or you're answering for them.
You can ask them. Mr. Wimmer, would you like to comment on that question? I guess
we have obviously been working with staff in order to make sure that we have a full and complete application and address all of the points of order that need to be contained in the application. However, we have not had any interaction with planning commissioners, trustees, anyone other than staff in terms of preparing for an application before this board.
Great. I appreciate the answer. Thank you.
Thank you. You know, at this point, I'm going to move on. I'm going to ask that we move on to item number 6 because we've made a motion to defer and we are deferring till next month. Ms.
President McKay, we can't hear you.
Bart?
We couldn't hear you.
Yeah, we couldn't hear you after you said there was.
Oh. I'm going to ask that that Bart, that you connect with Wimmer Communities, tomorrow at the earliest and see what the opportunities are to schedule this item.
President McKeag,
Yes.
I would like to ask for a point of accommodation and have a 5-minute bio break.
Yes, we can have a 3-minute bio break.
I'll run.
Thank you.
President McKay, I was going to ask if, I think we can all be flexible. If Bart could work with Wimmer to come back with a date that's convenient for them. It doesn't have to be that 4th Tuesday. If the 5th Tuesday or Wednesday or whatever works out, let's see if we can do
Thank
that.
you. I appreciate that.
And, one thing, I don't want to get into the weeds, but
oh, you know what, Commissioner? I am going to have to say, I did call a 3-minute recess, so we should, and I'll take your comment when you get back.
Great, thanks so much.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, thank you. Hi, how you doing?
Okay. Okay, Commissioner Miller, I'll take your comment and then I want to move on to item 6.
Great, thanks. I was just saying that I think we can accommodate Wimmer if that date in August doesn't work. Let's find a date, in the second half of the month that does work for them. And I became aware yesterday that classes at Lake Bluff ended like 4 or 5 days before they did their traffic study. So the data didn't reflect, normal pedestrian vehicular traffic. I don't know when.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. So
Commissioner Miller, that pertains to the application, so we can't take that comment.
Well, when
no, I'm sorry.
You can reconsider it.
You can submit that comment to, or someone can reconsider the motion if you really want to talk about the application, but we've deferred it. There's no discussion.
That's fine. No discussion. I'll send an email to Bart. Never mind.
Thank you. And just so you know that your email will then be considered when we consider the application.
Okay, that's fine.
Okay.
We can't hear you, President McKeag.
Is my sound off?
You're good now. If you want to start over.
Okay.
Introduction.
Okay. So as you will recall, at our last meeting, we reviewed the current code. Director Griepentrag presented areas where we could simplify the code, or things were outdated, or there were best practice improvements. He took our consensus, which is well documented in the minutes, and highlighted, he's presenting us with a report that's been updated with red text based on the consensus that we gave in terms of guidance. And he also brought forward a red line draft of a revised Chapter 535. What we are being asked to do tonight is to, Bart is going to walk us through all the information related to this item. We will then, the only thing that has not been discussed is changing the parking ratio. Because we gave consensus and direction at the previous meeting, I'm going to assume that there's not going to be a reason to relitigate any of those items. Questions are fine, suggestions for improvement. At the end of this discussion, what I am hoping for is that we will either make a recommendation with the draft, make a recommendation to advance the draft to the village board for approval as is, or with changes based on our discussion, or it's possible we will take no action tonight. Those are the 3 options that I see. So I just wanted to lay that out for everyone. We'll have Bart walk us through, I'll take public comment, and then we will discuss.
Thank you, President McKeag. So I do have a brief presentation just kind of outlining the changes. As I understand your direction, I'll go through all of the slides, and then if we want to come back to any of them, I'm happy to bring them back up later in the discussion. But for the sake of completeness, I will go through the entire presentation, and then we can come back to it as my understanding of the expectation here. So as you referenced, this is a continuation of a conversation that we had last month. I don't need to read the first 4 bullet points because that was kind of the introduction as to why we're here at this point to discuss this. As you mentioned, there was direction provided to staff to draft a code update at the June 22nd, 2021 Plan Commission meeting, which has been done and included in your packet for your review and discussion tonight. As you mentioned, the next steps would be to discuss the proposed draft, request changes or additional information or consideration of the recommendation. As a reminder, the Plan Commission's role is advisory to the village board. Any zoning code update would require a Class 2 notice in the paper and a public hearing prior to consideration. That typically always requires at least 1 month in between discussions. So if we were to come to a recommendation tonight, we would not be hearing this until September at its earliest in front of the village board with the public hearing. The first section that we discussed for updating would be related to the applicability. Currently, it is triggered by new construction and substantial alterations. As I mentioned last meeting, substantial alterations is very difficult to qualify for and or to identify, particularly in larger mixed-use buildings. The proposed update would consolidate the existing chapter 53546 and 53550 into one applicability section. It would substitute substantial alteration with substantial enlargement. The enlargement would be defined as an addition that adds 25% or more of the building's floor plan area or 2,500 square feet, whichever is less. That 2,500 square feet is a common number that will be reflected in future code updates as well. I as staff believe 2,500 square feet represents a typical standard small retail office type of use in the business district. So that is where that's coming from. For reference, Fiddleheads, I believe I mentioned, was 2,000 square feet. And that was the most recent parking special exception that we allowed for a commercial use. Also, I would remove the occupancy or use permit as a trigger. Instead, I would trigger it by a change in use classification. So once again, if it's going from a restaurant to a restaurant, there's no need, in my opinion, to have that reviewed. But if it's going from a office space to an assembly space, then I do agree that there should be some sort of level of review in terms of how that new use is changing the character of the development. So I would remove the occupancy or use permit and just replace it with use classification change. The use categories, as we just discussed last meeting, would consolidate from 4 categories into 3. Dwelling and lodging uses, educational, institutional, and other assembly would be renamed from schools, institutions, auditoriums, and other places of assembly, just kind of easier for us to grasp. And then business use districts, we would remove the recreational uses. It's either a business, a dwelling, or an assembly use. The recreational use kind of fit in between those two. And to me, it was kind of confusing. So I would recommend, and as we discussed by consensus last meeting, to go down to 3. The ratio modifications were not prepared or presented for last discussion. So I presume this will be the larger component of what we're here for tonight. Within the proposed draft dwelling and lodging uses, there would be no changes to hotels. I am recommending that the Plan Commission and Village Board consider modifying multifamily dwelling units to 1 space per unit. That would maintain the requirement for parking. It does not eliminate, as others have done. I have not got the direction to go that far. We are just looking at modifying it at this point. It would align equitably with single family and duplex requirements. It would align closer with our built environment. I did provide a spreadsheet of multifamily buildings in the Village of Shorewood and their current parking requirement, or the current parking provisions with their requirements. As you'll note in that spreadsheet, we are never close to 1.75 with that. These are above the City of Milwaukee requirements. I heard some feedback from members and residents that, that we should prepare our own. We should not copy what the city does. So for reference, these are above what the City of Milwaukee does require. It recognizes that special exception approvals have been considered and granted relatively frequently, admittedly more so with commercial developments, but also recently with multifamily use. And then the recognition of land value in small scale development. We don't have large parcels that can accommodate large surface lots or multi-layered underground parking. So this would recognize land value in small scale development and hopefully get us more developments of that range, as opposed to larger, perhaps 6-story planned development district kind of uses. This would allow for those smaller scale developments perhaps to have a better shot at development here in the village. I would recommend that we treat all multifamily dwelling units the same. We currently have a split between the business district and the residential district. Once again, I'm arguing for equitable treatment of them with single family and duplex units. And then no changes to single family or 2-family dwellings would be proposed within the required section. Just for reference, if we want to look at this, this is the chart that was shared last time of our requirements versus the SMART code, which is a national standard, as well as Whitefish Bay and Milwaukee, our 2 adjacent neighbors to the north and south. Ratio modifications for educational, institutional, and other assembly uses. I would create a general category requirement that says 1 space for every 500 square feet of floor area, or 5 seats at maximum capacity, whichever is most applicable. I would also, though, maintain separate requirements for hospitals and nursing homes. Those are exceptional uses, as well as schools, which have large impacts. I don't anticipate the village to have, many schools developed, but if by chance we would. Primary schools, 1 space for faculty. Secondary schools, 1 for every 7 students, and 1 space for each 4 faculty members. I believe the secondary category would be slightly modified to align with some other standards, but the primary would be staying the same. But other than that, any other educational, institutional, or assembly use would go on that general requirement of 1 space for every 500 square feet of floor area, or the 5 seats at maximum capacity, just because assemblies are relatively impactful in terms of the number of people coming at once. Ratio modifications for business use districts. I would also create a general requirement, 1 space for every 500 square feet of floor area above that 2,500 square foot ratio. So as I mentioned, the assembly uses, I personally and professionally feel as though those have more impact on the number coming at once, as opposed to a business district use, which is kind of throughout the day. And so I would exempt that first 2,500 square feet. This threshold acknowledges, once again, the small scale built environment of our walkable downtown, and it would allow for the reuse and establishment of smaller scale businesses. The 2,500 square feet also aligns with the substantial enlargement definition that was presented earlier. With that, I would still maintain separate requirements for auto service stations. Obviously, those have large impacts in terms of the number of cars they're fixing and picking up and dropping off, as well as medical, dental, and veterinary clinics, which has historically been a challenge for certain areas with respect to the number of employees and the traffic that those seek. So I would keep those separate. Adjustments to the requirements. So this was discussed at last meeting as to whether or not the requirements would ever qualify for reductions or adjustments. I would propose that we consider reducing them for immediately adjacent on-street parking spaces. So once again, if an assembly use comes in and our parking code is going to require them to have 10 uses and they have access to 5 spaces outside of their space, I would consider that we allow that as a reduction. Other places do provide credit for transit access. However, in the review of our district, all spaces would qualify. So it really makes no sense to reduce those requirements, but rather to consider them within the general, the ratio itself, because the adjustment would simply apply to everyone. It makes no sense, in my opinion, to have that spelled out separately, as other communities have done. Within the general requirements section, I would consider an allowance for tandem spaces. Once again, so if you park in front of, or perhaps on top or on bottom, whatever, however it works out, and you control those spaces, that does allow for a better use of the space, a more flexible arrangement. As long as that household or that business maintains rights to both of those, I would allow that to be considered as 2 spaces as opposed to 1. That was allowed in the Collectivo building, the Cornerstone 4,500, when that received a planned development district as an exception within that planned development district review. We discussed removing wheel stop requirements. We're not enforcing that currently. In addition, I should say, reviewing the proposed changes, I would also request that the Plan Commission consider removal of the last sentence in that section as well. Upon further review, it's just kind of confusing, and it actually doesn't even relate to the requirements in this section. So the section, or the question the sentence I'm referring to is in 535-49G. And I don't have it in front of me, sorry, let me grab it. Accepted from the parking space dimensions set forth herein shall be spaces located in the parking lot not governed by the use requirements of 535-47 of this article. Once again, if it's not related to the article, I'm not sure why we would have it in here. And then in such cases, market considerations shall control the size of the parking space and parking lots as determined by the Planning and Development Department of the village, but subject to approval of the village board. I'm going to be honest, I have no idea what that was intended to provide. I'm not sure what market conditions would be. And once again, I'm not sure why the village board would be the body to review that. So I don't think it's relevant to the special exception or to the parking section because it specifically says it's not 535-47. So I would also consider that we remove those 2 sentences within the general requirement section. We discussed and agreed screening parking lots should be triggered by a new occupancy to be reviewed by the design review board. And then an allowance for up to 2 vehicle parking spaces on residential properties subject to required green space. Currently, we capped it at 1 for a single family, but in my opinion, if there's space for 2 and the green space requirements aren't overly burdened, I would allow the provision of 2 vehicle parking spaces, acknowledging how useful that could be to single family homeowners. And then lastly, removal of rear and side yard screening. We're not enforcing that. We do enforce street side yard screening, so on corner lots. But in rear and side yards, we are not actively requiring walls or screening when parking spaces are developed. Special exceptions, we discussed this last time that we would include a notice and public hearing requirements, the same as the conditional use permit. So once again, that would establish a class 2 notice. So just for reference, based on what I heard in the last discussion, That would mean that we would get the application in and the agenda would be created and noticed. It would be published in the newspaper. But just for your reference, that does not mean that the materials would be ready. The materials as a standard are always ready the week prior to the meeting. So the notice would be granted and people at that point would have the right to contact my office to get a copy of the application. But with respect to any sort of staff report or comment on the application, that would not be developed till later. But this would give earlier notice that the application is on file and is available for review. Once again, aligning with the conditional use permit requirements that we currently have. And that essentially sums up my presentation. Once again, I'm happy to go back to any slides that we need to further discussion.
At this time, I'd like to see if there are members of the public who would like to be heard on this matter. And then I will open it up to the Plan Commission for questions and comments related to the information before us this evening. If there are any members of the public who would like to be heard on this matter, you can raise your hand or unmute yourself and stating your name and address.
I see Dawn Blackmore with her hand raised.
Yes, hi, thank you.
Thank you.
Dawn Blackmore, 4240 North Ardmore Avenue. I just had a couple questions. I read a lot of the packet, not everything. So I do appreciate that the agenda number 5 was deferred. Thank you. Was the article people over parking? I wasn't sure, was that article, there's a bunch of different articles in the packet. Was that article connected to this item or to number 5?
It was included within item number 6. During the June discussion, Plan Commissioners had requested to receive additional articles on trends and best practices on parking, and those were part that were submitted to me or that I had found previously. So those were either provided by other members or what, but they were provided for item number 6.
Okay, super. So that would be this item, right? Is that the current item?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes,
so
that is the current item.
I just wanted to be respectful if it had nothing to do with. I
I appreciate that.
Oh, sure. I appreciated the best practices and the articles. I enjoyed them very much. I thought they were very important. I just had a question about it because the people over parking in particular, it talks about my hometown, Minneapolis, and it sort of hangs its hat on the value and necessity and critical importance of building more affordable housing. That's kind of what it talks about. The examples are how affordable housing was increased successfully by allowing developers to build apartments with less parking, and therefore they offered the rent below the market's established levels. So like the example in the article, new studio apartments, which typically went from about $1,200 per month, were being offered for less than $1,000 per month. And I'm wondering, I see the value in tying this kind of thing with offering exemptions to how we've required certain amount of parking slots in the past to sort of what I think the Shorewood Comprehensive Plan deems very important. And that's offering more affordable housing and more attainable housing in this village. So I'm just wondering, I don't really see that connection being made. I think that was, the main point of the article is how effective this was to get that affordable housing to happen and be successful. And so I don't know, I just really wonder, is that being used here? Because I don't see it in what you just presented, Mr. Greipentrag. So I wasn't sure how the article related to, I thought it very positive and impactful, and I actually was hoping that we'd do something like that.
Mm-hmm.
That's all.
Bart?
I'd be
Thank
happy to respond if you're open to that. Yes. And I apologize for perhaps not clarifying that the adjustment section that I mentioned. So I mentioned an adjustment for on-street parking. There also are, if the Plan Commission and Board were willing to consider it, you could do adjustments for things such as senior housing, affordable housing, electronic or electric vehicle charging, provided bike parking. So perhaps that section could use a little more flushing out if provided additional direction from the Plan Commission. I'd be happy to continue to look at potential exceptions for those desired types of development. I just do want to point out, I would probably need to clarify because the village or the state does have a prohibition on inclusionary zoning. So I don't make sure that doesn't infringe on that with respect to us requiring this, but I think that provides an incentive to do so. So I just want to double check on that. So I think that's a point well taken. Thank you very much for providing it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Blackmore. Any other members of the public who would like to be heard on this matter?
Mr. Walsh has his hand raised.
Oh, yes. Okay, Mr. Walsh, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gruppetag. My name is Dan Walsh. I live at 4024 North Stowell Avenue. And I appreciate all the work of the staff and the commissioners on this. There were a couple of things that have kept coming up since February when we first started to learn and talk about the project on Stowell and Capitol. And one consistent question that has come up is what was the genesis of the parking ratio being changed originally to 1.75? There was a discussion of historically, like there was no parking ratio, and at some point it got to 1.75, and there's really never been any explanation. And I feel like previous versions of this Plan Commission and the Village Board have been some very, very smart people, and they've created these rules for reasons. And I'm not saying they shouldn't be adjusted, but there must have been a reason for them. So I was looking for an answer for that. Then second, I think it'd be really nice for everybody involved to understand what has the village lost because this parking ratio is too high and it needs to be adjusted. I think it would be important for everybody to know, like, what aren't we doing because of this, and what projects have been proposed that didn't get done, and then finally, not finally, but in addition, as an adjunct to that, what will happen if you take it from where it is today, 1.75 to 1 per unit? That is a very, very radical change. I don't think anybody in the village says, hey, we want to be just like Milwaukee when it comes to East Side parking. I think if anything, we want to be more like Whitefish Bay would be my guess. I'm not positive. I don't know what the impacts of those. I'm not a planner. I'm sure there's some still on this call, but having a better understanding of exactly what the impact would be, taking, for example, the projects that we're looking at, because that change in ratio, really what it actually does is dramatically increase the density of development possibilities in the village of Shorewood. And take all the parking issues aside, those density issues affect all the people in the neighborhood and all the people in the village. So before we decide to make this change, we should really think about, okay, what does it really mean on the corner of Capitol and Stowell and Capitol and Prospect and anywhere else there's going to be a project. And then one thing I'd really think the village should think hard about is limiting the applicability of special exceptions. The idea that you have a zoning code that requires 1.75 stalls per unit, to me, and maybe I don't know how other people think about it, but a special exception, would take you down to maybe 1.5, 1.4, but to cut your zoning code requirement by 60%, that's really not a special exception. That's a variance, guys. That is not something that you should be able to do without a lot more village input. And so I think you should in this code update, change what it means to ask for and approve a special exception. Thanks very much. I appreciate your time and consideration of all this.
Thank you. Any other members of the public? Ms.
Ann, I'm
Beagley?
sorry. This is Elizabeth Beagley. Can I say something? I can't get my hand raising to work.
Sure. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry. Hi, my name is Elizabeth Beagley, and I live at 2413 East Shorewood Boulevard. And I was a planner in the city of Portland, Oregon, during a time when we were changing our zoning down with parking. We went from, I think it was close to 1.75 down to 1.25 per unit. And the reason why we were able to do that was because we had a light rail system, we had mild temperatures, and we had a really thriving bus system in our communities. And those were some of the reasons why it was successful where I lived, and when I was working there, and I lived there as well. However, I will say that the change in Portland over the last 15 years, as we did these changes in our zoning code, it has substantially changed the feel of all of the communities throughout Portland, Oregon. And we have to understand that when we're changing this, it will change the feeling of our communities if we're increasing density without providing parking. So we just have to look at what are the impacts of this. And we don't have a thriving bus. We have a reduced bus system. We have no light rail, and we have snow and very cold weather. And people use cars during those times. So that's my thoughts on it. I think it's a hard sell to go down that far. I understand that's where a lot of places are going, but we don't have the existing infrastructure to give people alternative transportation at this time.
Thank you. Any other members of the public? Trustee Stokebrand?
Thank you. I'm just wondering, because I don't know about this kind of thing, but perhaps the woman who just spoke could address this. Is there any way we could get like a memo of understanding or something from the county that, you know, if we're willing to do certain things toward affordable housing, et cetera, that we could get a memo of understanding or a contract from the county that says, we promise we will not cut or in any way diminish your bus service for, you know, I don't know how many years. Because I think the thing that's really frustrating for a lot of people is to come to the understanding that, okay, we're all supposed to, you know, more of us are supposed to not use cars. And I think that's a great idea. If you're young and agile and able and you don't care about snow or a wind chill of -2, but for those of us that have issues with some of those things, what about the county? I mean, it seems difficult for me, and this may be an unrelated issue. I just don't know how we can go down the road toward pushing people to use their vehicles less without a commitment for public transportation from the county, because that's our go-to here. What would you suggest we do with the county?
Trustee Stokebrand, I recall you posing that at the CDA meeting last month, and I think it is a good question. I guess I would direct it to the village board discussion when this comes before them. Others, members of the public? In the meantime, Bart, I'd appreciate it if you made a note of that question around intergovernmental cooperation around public transit. And we can follow that up to see where it belongs. Okay, I am not. Does anybody else see hands raised or microphones unmuted? besides commissioners? Okay. I'd like to close public comments at this time and move to Plan Commission discussion. And I see, yes.
I would just say you did this last meeting, which I thought was really good. You might want to give one more, say, does anyone, last call, you know what I'm saying?
Okay. Appreciated. Last call for public comment before I close and move to Plan Commission discussion. For those of you who haven't attended meetings, that's how I proceed so that we aren't going back and forth and we can follow our trains of thought a little bit more clearly. I'll invite anybody who has thoughts and comments based on our discussion this evening to submit them in writing, as whatever happens or doesn't happen tonight will eventually end up at the village board. Commissioner Kudo, would you like to be recognized?
Sure, I was taking a note. I'm sorry. I was paying attention. Bart, can you go back to slide 27, please, in your presentation? It was the
Sorry.
ratio slide.
I didn't mean to catch you off guard. Would you like me to come back?
You're muted, buddy. So can you walk us through where we got to one-to-one, maybe this was a topic of conversation for the last meeting, so I do apologize. We were on our first post-COVID family vacation. But can you walk me through, sorry, Dan, where we got the 1.1 versus Whitefish-Bay or Milwaukee? And then you said that we still had a higher threshold than Milwaukee. Can you explain what Milwaukee's is? I don't see it on.
Sure. Yep. So the commercially zoned multifamily, which is medium to high density, which is what our commercial district is representative of. The SMART code, which is a national model based or developed by the Congress for New Urbanism, which is also the guidebook that I had shared in the June meeting in terms of how to go about changing your code. So I referenced their guidebook last year, and last meeting, they referenced the SMART code, which is 1-to-1 in medium to high density districts like this. And then right next to it, Milwaukee, they only require 0.67 units per dwelling, with additional available reductions for things such as access to transit, access to public parking, on-street parking. So in reality, it's actually even less than the 0.67, but their requirement, their minimum requirement without any reductions in Milwaukee is 0.67 per unit. But my recommendation would be to align with the SMART code, which is a recommendation of 1-to-1 in the medium and high density areas. So
if we're looking at the 1-to-1, as an example, the Wimmer project that was just before us, does that still come to us for consideration, or does it not?
Based on the parking that they're provided, it would come to you with respect to that 14 of them, I believe, are not enclosed. And so the current requirement is for enclosed parking. So the ratio, they would meet the ratio, but the enclosed element, which once again, all needs to be reviewed and confirmed, and perhaps the Plan Commission wants to reduce or eliminate that, but that's not my suggestion at this moment. I'm looking at the ratios. That would not come to you for a ratio requirement. It would come to you for the surface parking that's being proposed.
Okay, so as long as they enclosed it, it wouldn't come to us at all.
Correct. If they built a garage within those surface parking spaces, it would not correct.
Okay, cool. And then I'm gonna ask two questions. Sorry. One of the final slides you had was regard to notice, residential notice. So I understand that the agenda is put out, but that the packet isn't complete until the Friday or what have you before the Tuesday meeting. Is there a way to have the packet completed earlier so that we don't run into some of the problems that we've run into with the last two development proposals before us, so that folks can digest a 200-page or a 50-page packet not necessarily over a weekend and a Monday, but for perhaps a week or a little bit longer? Is there a way to adjust that moving forward? And would that be part of what we're talking about now?
I mean, it could be, and I don't mean to sound difficult on this, but getting packets out earlier is always desired. It's never the reality because every other person is asking for my work in those mean times, right? So I was thinking—
You're a popular guy, I get it.
Yeah, I was thinking—
I understand.
I was thinking out loud with respect to how this could be noticed differently. And the example that comes to mind is planned development districts. When a planned development district is proposed, there's a 2-meeting requirement where the first meeting, the applicant comes directly to the plan commission without even necessarily staff comment, outlining what they're proposing to do. And the plan commission at that point has the ability to ask questions and request things. Then they come back with their application at the next meeting. So that is a 2-meeting requirement for a planned development district. Now that is a zoning change. That's I would argue a little more, it's a bigger change than a parking special exception. But with respect to conditional uses or design review board notices, this would be standard. I will be honest, I cannot promise to get packets out, 4 weeks in advance of meetings, particularly if I get the application, 3 days prior to that. I guarantee you I'm working on something else at the time. So I apologize if that sounds like I'm,
No. That sounds like a totally reasonable. I'm just wondering if we can't change the requirements for the applicants so that it's not BART that is pushing in the end. It's the applicants know that they need to have their stuff in 2 weeks prior to a meeting. So that gives you an appropriate amount of time to turn it around to get it out to the public. You know what I mean? Like I'm not trying to put more on you. I'm perhaps hoping that we can adjust the timeline so that you have a longer period to turn it around.
Yeah,
I'm actually trying to help you, Bart. I'm trying to help you.
In this example, the application would be required to be complete before we would notice it to the public. So once we notice it to the public, it is the public's right to view the application, which is what happened with respect to the media. So we noticed it and they immediately contacted us and I would see the application. So we gave the application. So in this example, the application would be on file at least a month prior to the consideration. So at that point, anyone could review what was submitted. My comments or any additional comments from other staff members wouldn't be provided until the week before the meeting, but that application once again would be then on file a month prior to, which I would hope would give everyone enough time to at least seek it out and review it themselves.
And would that month also include, if we're going to put it on the agenda for the next meeting, could that month also include President McCaig's good idea of noticing folks by letter or by hand delivered note?
Yeah,
so that they have a time so that they know that it exists, not that it just exists for us nerds who do this volunteer professionally.
Yeah, the conditional use permit does require that we mail those notices to 200 feet. So if we look at the slide and in the packet, the notice would be provided to those residents or property owners, I should say.
And what would be the timeline to that notice again?
So as it's drafted, it's drafted in 535-51B. The Planning and Development Department shall also provide notice to the owners of record of properties within 200 feet of the property for which the special exception is be considered at least 7 days prior to the hearing. If you wanted to, you could debate that date, but that is what the conditional use permit currently states.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Bart.
Thank you, Commissioner Kudo. I definitely, I started a conversation about this exact thing with Bart and about timelines and things like that. And I guess what I would recommend is that
I'm sorry, President McCaig, you're muted or cutting out.
Okay, sorry, I know I went out there. So I said I I started a conversation with Bart about this very thing to try to increase the amount of notice and engagement and the time, with the understanding that this is very technical stuff and it's not things that people pay attention to. So I think those are all good suggestions, and I would say that I would ask Bart to make a note of ways that we might work with the timelines to see how we can still be responsive to the matters at hand, but also include more possibility for public engagement. So thank you for raising that.
Thank you.
All right, Commissioner Kylie Miller.
Thank you. Sticking with that topic of conditional use permits for just a second. I think this is like maybe the second or third time that we had an applicant for a conditional use permit that did not appear before us. And as I recall, like with JP&L meetings, some representative always had to show up. And I thought we usually did have someone. I know once Erica got someone on the speakerphone so that we could, ask questions. Is that something that we could make a requirement part? To have the applicant for whatever that conditional use might be appear before us. So when the commissioners or a member of the public has a question, that they're there to provide the answer.
I might actually ask for Nathan if he has any thoughts on that. I mean, it sounds reasonable. I just want to make sure state statute doesn't have any, because state statute dictates a lot of conditional use permit requirements. So unless for some reason there's a reason that we shouldn't,
right now is that we're really talking about changing the ratio of the required parking ratio with respect to these multifamily dwelling units.
Yeah.
And that relates to a special exception, not a conditional use. It's that the parking is not a use. So I think it's a little bit off topic, but the other thing to keep in mind, the discussion about notice and the process, just as a practical matter, if the ratio on a hypothetical level, if you change the ratio and the ratio moves downward on a hypothetical level, it's probably going to be a self-limiting thing because you're probably not going to get any more of these requests. The reason you're getting so many requests is because the ratio is 1.75. And keep in mind that you're probably never going to get a developer that's going to propose multifamily housing like that without at least a 1-to-1 ratio. But as a practical matter, they're also keep in mind that the pre-existing properties that were constructed and predate the code, none of this applies to them. They're grandfathered in. So the total amount of properties that you're really talking about you're talking about new development where they have less than the required 1.75 ratio. So that the total amount of spaces you could ever add through this process is self-limiting based upon where there's actually areas where you could develop and where you might be less than the 1.75 existing ratio. So it's not like if you change the ratio that you're going to get 9,000 applications the next day to even go below that amount, or you're going to put 9,000 extra cars on the road the following day. It's self-limiting because most of the properties that predate construction, the construction predating the code, this already doesn't apply. So there's not that many opportunities for this. Am I right on that part?
Yeah, I was just going to say more directly, perhaps to Barbara's question. The Plan Commission, you could defer action for the applicant to show up if you had questions that weren't answerable. So in the case tonight, if I couldn't answer those and that you needed that information, I think you're well within your right to defer it. So requiring within the code that it was necessary, it's always within your right to defer it for the applicant to provide more information, perhaps including an in-person visit or a response to a question.
And maybe that's something we want to put on a future agenda item. Going back to your presentation, I was going to ask you to show the same chart that Eric did, comparing us to Milwaukee and Whitefish Bay. And am I remembering correctly that Whitefish Bay's ratio is 1.5?
Correct.
Because that's kind of where my thinking was. when reviewing the property that we've deferred till next month. And you know, it is possible to do 1.75 because the developers at the Cornerstone and the Ravenna managed to do it quite well. So I don't think we're going to never see development again. You know, if we lower it or keep it the same, or if we lower it, but not all the way to, you know, one for one. And I appreciate the comments from City Planner Elizabeth Beagley. Having been born and spent the first 35 years of my life in the city of Milwaukee, and then been a homeowner here in this little 1.5 square mile bubble of suburban Shorewood, this little village, I do appreciate the differences between living in a city and which has a central downtown versus being in a little burb that has really no downtown, but just, you know, a couple of commercial streets. So I have to admit that when I was reading those articles, I found myself getting really irritated when, you know, different cities were mentioned. And so sure, in travel, I've taken the light rail in Portland, I've taken the metro in DC. You know, we don't have the subways of New York or the L's of Chicago. And in mentioning some of the smaller cities, I spent an evening in Lexington, Kentucky, while driving home for my dad's last month. In Lexington is, you know, a lot bigger than Shorewood. So I had a difficult time comparing the things that they were able to do with what we're able to do. Because as was mentioned, you know, our climate here, our weather hampers a lot, even for those people who like to walk, you know, for several months of the year, that's not really a great option. So if we had all those transit opportunities, you know, that were mentioned in those articles, it might be a different story. I also, and Trustee Jim Orthofer mentioned this in the email he sent us, that I agree with him that having one uniform plan for the whole village wouldn't work because the neighborhoods are different. For example, as we saw 2 previous months, the southeast portion of the village is really impacted by that congested area thanks to UWM's Parkers. And so, you know, I don't think we can have, let's say if one area we think, okay, 1 for 1 is good. I don't think that's going to be applicable across the village. Duplexes and single family homes are a little different than multifamily buildings because in most cases, you know, people either have a driveway where they can pull an extra car into, or they can put a parking slab in, as we talked about. Whereas if you're an apartment dweller, you don't really have those options. I would argue that would make for good neighbors to keep that screening in when we do parking pads or allow parking pads, whether it's a, you know, small 4-foot fence or a little row of arborvitae. You know, nobody wants to be entertaining in their backyard or sitting on your patio and be looking at a little parking lot. Anyway, that's my thought, that I want us to keep in mind that we're not a city. We have very limited public transportation, and that most people's lives don't work the way that they do if you are living in one of those bigger cities that have those options available. Having grown up in Milwaukee, I don't think of myself as living in Shorewood. I think I live in Milwaukee County, where family and friends are spread throughout the county, in Waukesha County, Kenosha, Ozaki. We go to public parks throughout the county. We're not, you know, jobs. A lot of people have jobs that they need cars during the day. So although it's great to think like, oh yeah, we could just be like the east side of Milwaukee, the 3rd Ward, that's really not what Shorewood is. And one of the residents who said, you know, think about what you want your community to feel like. I think that's, you know, it's not a black and white or yes or no kind of question, but I think that's something we need to consider when we're thinking what's the impact going to be when we change these parking ratios. I think there's some wiggle room from where we are right now, but I do think 1 for 1 is too low. And I think those are basically my general sentiments. Thanks.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Thank you. Commissioner Wickland.
Yeah, thanks. Bart, can you go back to the one did you adjust the medical office at all? I can't remember what we discussed at our last meeting. Were we going to leave that the same? Was there a recommendation in your smart code for that?
So my memory, I'm going to pull up what we currently have. My memory is that my recommendation is to base it off of a conditional use permit review, which is more contextual in nature. I believe this is the wrong category. Oh, that was it.
I mean, I feel like that's one that kept popping up too, right? We had it for Ascension, we had it for Crux, we had it for, I mean, like those things keep popping up. Am I wrong on that?
Yeah, so we currently require the 4 per doctor plus 1 per employee, which I think is perhaps a bit high, but I understand that medical offices and clinics do have impacts on neighborhoods because the veterinary clinics, the 2 that I have most worked with most recently, do have parking needs. You know, they have a lot of people parking on streets and whatnot. So this slide doesn't, I don't think, show it, but I do believe that Milwaukee does require it as a part of their conditional use review. And so the recommendation within the packet would be that medical, dental, and veterinary clinics, the requirement is subject to review by the Plan Commission as a conditional use with a general guidance of 4 spaces per doctor, dentist, or veterinarian. So it would provide the 4 requirement, but it would be subject to a conditional use, not a special exception.
Okay. Yeah, and then in general, I think you did an awesome job preparing this from what we asked for last time. I think there was a lot of good information, and you know, I'm sure other people still have questions, but in general, you know, what are we looking for in a process here? Are we looking to say, Bart, great job, you know, we'd like you to send this to the village board? I mean, is that what we're getting to here?
Ultimately, at some point, yes, it will require a recommendation via vote to pass it along. So in the current form, this is what it is. You know, a motion could include changes to this, or it could be at a future meeting. But yes, ultimately, this will require a vote with a recommendation to the village board.
Okay, I'll let other people get to questions, but I have none, and thanks for all that hard work. Appreciate it.
And so just to clarify, my expectation is that at the end of our comments that there would either be a motion or a motion to defer till a future meeting to take action. But if the commissioners feel that they have enough information and somebody wants to make a motion, including, I believe Bart is looking for direction on a parking ratio too. Trustee Bockhorst, Commissioner Pollack, Commissioner Klein. I'll go last.
I'll go. Nobody's going. So heard a lot of great information here, and I have a question, I guess. We can change the parking ratio and be more in line with modern things. And that allows people to come forward with a business opportunity of redevelopment at a lower cost, right? Because the cost of parking is very high. But we have no say in what they charge for rent, right? We really have no say if they bring forward affordable housing or a mix of affordable housing and something else. So all that we can really vote on is the opportunity for affordable housing to come. This is how I kind of think about this. And then, you know, I've been thinking quite a bit about and asking around, what is the impact of density? I'm not talking about density of people, it's density of cars that don't have a parking space. And I think we get caught up quite a bit in density of people moving around versus where someone's going to park their car. You know, is it the density of traffic? Is it the density of parking spaces? You know, which are we really impacting with this change of ratios? So kind of questions, kind of me just talking out loud, I think.
Yeah, one quick response, which I believe I covered before, but yes, the state of Wisconsin does prohibit inclusionary zoning, so we can't require multifamily buildings to have, you know, affordable units within there. The one caveat with that is if we're a partner in the deals, perhaps we give TIF funding or funding, maybe the affordable housing money that has been set aside now by the village board. At that point, then yes, we have every right to ask for them to include it. But correct, if it's a by right development, we are not allowed to do that. And then one further note is, and I think I mentioned it at the last meeting, so I don't want to repeat myself too much, but the parking and transportation analysis from 2019 and 2020, we did spend, you know, a good year discussing whether or not we have adequate on-street parking or excess on-street parking, and whether or not permits could be available. The result of that process was to offer on-street permits. You all see the result of that. I don't see a big change in that, but so yeah, that study did suggest that we do have additional on-street parking capacity for things like that. So that did play into my suggested ratio, which is before you tonight.
Appreciate that comment, Bart. I hadn't even thought of the permits.
We've got a few questions, Bart. One of the requests from the last meeting was to understand how much parking demand was by parking permit request. Maybe I missed it in the packet. Can you direct me to what page number that might be on?
Yeah, I apologize. That is not in this packet. That is being prepared for the village board for their August 2nd meeting. And I had hoped that we would have it prepared in time for this packet, but I don't have that. It's part of their financial quarterly reviews. And so I'd be happy to provide that as requested.
Okay, thanks. Can you, I'm sorry, go ahead, President.
I was going to suggest that if this body is comfortable making a recommendation this evening, it could include that the village board evaluate that permit data.
Sure thing. I'll keep my questions really succinct here. Why not recommend a waiver of enclosure requirements if the purpose that we're trying to do is simplify here and decrease the number of special exceptions requested in meetings like this? My recollection, probably not as sharp as yours, but like, isn't most of the most recent requests all having a enclosure request as well? And so we would still be having these meetings and still be going through a lot of the same procedures, just with a narrower purview.
The Capitol and Stoll, that was all enclosed, but they had argued for on-street parking. It was somewhat confusing, but yeah, all of their off-street parking was enclosed. This one has the 14 spaces because it's split by that alley, and so those spaces over there. So it's kind of a unique situation. The reason I have not pushed for recommending that change is the guide that I provided last month in June suggested that the more important component with parking is screening it and getting it away from public view. And so they said the first thing that we should do is look towards where we allow it. Surface parking lots would be the worst case scenario. And so, yes, that does add cost to the enclosure. But I guess in my review, I maintained that that theory that we don't want to see surface parking within the business district if we can avoid it. And so enclosing it within a garage, if they have it, was applicable, whether that's first floor, underground, or elsewhere. But I'm open to conversation on that if that's seen as burdensome as well. But the theory behind it was that parking, off-street parking in a dense business district kind of breaks up that walkable feel.
Okay, I've got two more small points, and then I'm done with my questions. Can you clarify a little bit about like why there's a relationship between parking minimums and like potentially lower costs of rent or like affordability? And can you succinctly kind of sum that up? Because I've heard from a lot of residents today that they don't seem to see the relationship. I thought maybe you could identify that a little clearer.
I mean, yeah, so developers will tell you the cost of a underground parking space or a structured space is going to be between $20,000 and $30,000 a piece. You know, if you require, we have that they build 30 to 40 of them, you know, that does impact their bottom line of what they need to rent it for. Anecdotally, I can share this. I do not own a car, and I happily rent in buildings that don't have parking because they're cheaper. And so if we require the developments to develop, you know, parking at certain ratios, that will impact their bottom line, and it will require them to raise their rents to do so. And so that's the theory behind that.
Thanks. Last thing, we talk about using on-street parking a bit more judiciously and more thoughtfully, so probably using it more generally. And I'm just curious, and maybe this is just a topic that can be brought up to the village board, but if there is a trend towards electrification of vehicles, I'm just curious on how we plan to service a lot more residents that might have electrical vehicles and be parking on the street. I didn't see any of that in the materials that were provided. I'm just curious about how that might be addressed. That's all I had. Thanks.
Yeah, like I said, we could add that to the adjustment section if we think that would incentivize the development of that. Otherwise, it's been seen as kind of a response to people wanting, like, I'm going to rent in this building because they have that or because they don't have that. So it's been seen as kind of a market factor of people's own decisions. But from a village standpoint, if we want to incentivize that, we could either, you know, place them in our public lots, or we could incentivize that by saying, if you do this in exchange for that, then you can get a lowered ratio. So I'm willing to look at that. Once again, if that's a desire, I can look at how other communities have written that into their code. I know that they have, it's relatively new, but I know it does exist.
Thank you, Commissioner Pollack. Let's see, I see Commissioner Kudo's hand, but I haven't heard from Trustee Bockhorst or myself.
I'll probably save everyone time by letting you guys speak, but if you really want me to go, I'll go for it. I got my manifesto. So I really appreciate this discussion. I really appreciated the last discussion we had. I think we did some good work and made some great strides. I'll also say I want to really thank the first caller for public comment from Minneapolis. She brought up some great points, tying, you know, the real cost of parking and what it costs, you know, how those costs get passed on in rents. She also came from a climate, Minneapolis, pretty cold. I know it's a lot bigger than Shorewood, but you know, Shorewood is, by all intents and purposes, we are right next to Milwaukee. So it's not like we all have to cross a border and give passports to get to a new municipality. And we're not Milwaukee, that's for sure. But we are an extension, and we all know that. But anyway, so Minneapolis deals with a lot of, you know, weather issues and whatnot, and they went down to a radical change, to having zero parking requirements for development. So I don't think we're going far enough here in going down from 1.75 to 1. I'm sure all of you are aware that our parking code was created in 1951. Before that, we did not have a requirement. So we went through a radical change, and you might call it a modernization, right? In 1951 to create this requirement, because car culture, that was the advent of car culture. It was also suburbanization, white flight, a whole bunch of different things happened in the 50s. And I'm really glad I don't live during that time. I'm glad that I live now. So anyway, so it is time for us to modernize and change with the times now. I would advocate for, again, going down to fewer requirements. But I think that this is a good stutter step, and that's something for future boards and future commissions to decide when they want to look at, where they want to be in the future. And it was kind of funny because I think someone asked, that it's important for us to understand why from 1951. And I mean, I could speculate all the live long day. I don't have a time machine. I don't think we're going to find that out. But I do know where we are now. And we have all read the materials. The science, the data is out there that we are spending more or asking everyone to spend more. And if you build it, they will come. So, yeah, I don't want to go back, to be a stain on society as far as in the past. As someone, I am part of the 54% of Shorewood that rents, okay? We do have great public transportation options. I take them more than half the time to commute to work, to go elsewhere. I went a whole year without a car living in Shorewood. So did at the time, my husband. My children take public transportation. They take bicycles. Yes, we have a car, okay? One car, but we don't always take it. Let's see, my niece. Anyway, I could name a ton of people that go without cars, but that's kind of a moot point because we're not asking people to go without cars here. And that came up a lot. So I'd be remiss if I didn't mention this. We are not asking anyone on this commission or anyone who has a car at this time that currently resides in Shorewood to get rid of their vehicle. I mean, maybe some people are asking you to do that, but that's not what is before us. Also, bus ridership, the use of public transportation, the more people that actually use it, the more likely, because basic economics, the more possibilities will exist. So, but that's neither here nor there, because again, it's a moot point that we're not asking for anyone to give up their cars. So anyway, we can disagree on the whole philosophy around, what's best for the environment, what's best for us, but really that's not what we're here to do. We're here to modernize our parking code and our requirements. Let's see. I think also we would be, what would the word be? I guess stubborn and not really good listeners if we didn't take into consideration the pages and pages and hours and all of the parking discussion that we had received, from past projects. And I'll just use the last one that's up for appeal once again, on how many people are talking about how they don't want more cars on the streets, right? And a variety of things. Unfortunately, our populations, or fortunately, however you want to look at it, are increasing, right? People want to move to Shorewood. Sorry, guys. Ann and I may have done a good job in the past, in making this such a great place, or helping, build off of what others have. But it's a desirable location. That's why a lot of us pay top dollar to live here, right? So anyway, how we go forward, if we want to determine if we want to have more cars on the streets, or if we want to allow the market to take care of itself, and if people want to build apartments, duplexes, housing, etc., that don't accommodate what some of us consider the modern need for parking, then that's incumbent upon them. They're not asking us for money, and in this case, that's irrelevant. But I'm just saying that there is enough data out there to support making these changes. So I'll be quiet unless this whole conversation turns. I'm ready to vote. I know you want to speak, Ann, and I know that maybe Eric does as well. But I'd say, Bart, fantastic job. I didn't think you'd be able to turn this around in this amount of time. We have a very small staff. I appreciate all the hard work and all the hard work of the commissioners here as well, past, current, etc. So I'll stop there. I'm exhausted.
Thank you, Trustee Bockhorst. I'm going to turn off my camera, so hopefully, is my sound okay? Okay? Okay, thanks. I'm gonna watch Commissioner Kudo. He's on it when I'm not when he can't hear me. All right, I am gonna say that I am ready to make a recommendation tonight. I think the 1-to-1 parking ratio is very important. It brings us into alignment of what functionally exists in
Eric, you were fast there. Impressive.
She started so strong, and it just faded away.
Can't wait till we're all in person again.
Can you hear me?
Now we can.
Now you can. When did you lose me?
Right away.
When
Yeah.
Eric started shaking his head.
about a sentence in.
Oh, great. All right, here we go again. I support the 1-to-1 ratio. I am ready to make a recommendation tonight because I know that the village board will receive it and give it due diligence and probably consider other things as well. I think the 1-to-1 ratio is appropriate because it brings us into alignment about functionally what has been happening and what works. I think and I agree with all the other benefits that were mentioned this evening. As a member of the village board, I do feel a responsibility to create opportunities to increase tax base, to lessen the burden on residential property owners. I also feel a responsibility to create opportunities to help businesses, to bring new customers, to draw people to our village to use the businesses. I also feel a responsibility to look at our sustainability and our walkability and our encouraging people to make a commitment and thinking forward into the future as far as our environmental impact. So I think that supporting a 1-to-1 ratio change at this time gets us closer to doing all those things. I think as far as the feel of the village, we can't afford to have no traffic. We can't afford to have to not have redevelopment. It's just not a formula that works. Also, land use wise, we're much closer to an urban community than a suburban community. And that's just the way that it is. And so I think that we need to help us all really challenge those perceptions and really look at the positives of what we have going for us. I would support the suggestions around timeline adjustments to the code, considering adjustments for electrification, if we want to move those forwards. Thank you. That's all I have. Commissioner Kudo, would you like to add?
I mean, I'm about to get smoked on this vote, so there isn't too much to add here.
Follow that one.
There you go. Yeah, I mean, I just, I think that the 1.75 to 1 is too big of a jump. I think that, there's the world we want it to live in, and then the world that we are living in. And looking at 1.5, I'd be much more comfortable with that, making an incremental change down. I think 1.75 is ludicrous. It's just too outdated for the society that we live in. But, we have heard time and time and time again from residents that come before us with concerns about development and what have you in Shorewood, that there are too many cars in Shorewood. There are too many exceptions. And I don't think that going 1-to-1 on development to car is going to help us at all with that problem. I certainly would love to see more people riding bikes. I certainly would love to see more people using electric vehicles, but that's not where we are. And given the age of the population in Shorewood, that's not where we're going to be for a while. And so, going back to what Barbara was talking about with not everyone having the ability to hop on public transportation or not having public transportation that goes exactly where they need to go, I just worry that we are shooting ourselves in the foot by not being able to regulate through the Plan Commission in the future a 1.5 to 1 ratio, because we're going to take a lot of stuff off our plates on things that should be coming before us and things that we should be putting our eyes on and taking votes on. but I'm about to lose. So it is what it is. Thanks
I
all.
don't know about that.
Oh,
I don't know about that.
Watch this happen right now.
But what I will say, I'll just point you to functionally our parking ratio right now is 0.34, I think. If you look at all the parking provision of all the multifamilies that we have. So 1-to-1 is actually pretty conservative for new development.
Go lower.
All right. With that, would anybody like to make a motion to recommend the modifications as presented with additions, including a parking ratio of your choice? I will say going with the 1-to-1 since that's what was recommended to us this evening.
Someone do it before Eric does 1 to 1.5.
I'm not going to make us vote twice. I wouldn't do that to you.
I'll second it, Eric.
I'll make a motion. So to go with what Bart's recommending here of the 1-to-1, the whole table actually, and the other things that we talked about today.
I'll second that. Only if it's just stated as is. No, I'm just kidding, Trace.
Let's give Crystal a moment to.
Is there a motion in the packet? I don't have the page pulled up.
I've been flipping it around. I haven't seen one.
I thought there was, but maybe that was the other stuff.
Yeah. Bart, did you leave us a line to read? Jumps right into the article.
It looks like I did not.
Yeah.
But yeah, typically it would be a motion as drafted within the packet. That'd be a pretty standard motion. The board also often does, unless you wanted to change something specifically, then you could point that out. Yeah, I apologize. Once again, that was not in there either.
Well, Bart, what would you have put in the packet? How about that?
I move to approve modifications to Chapter 535 zoning, Article 9, off-street parking as presented within the staff report.
Would we add to be presented to the village board for consideration and approval?
Yes, yep, I recommend village board consideration of, because you're correct. You're not making you're not approving it. You're recommending the board consider the recommendation within the packet.
Mm-hmm. And then the information that the village board will receive will include the additional comments from tonight.
Correct. Yeah. So the board will receive this version, but there will also be the comments added to it with respect to electric vehicle charging is the one that I noted down, and then the modification of the timeline as presented, I believe.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. So I like Attorney Bear's idea of giving Crystal a moment to get that down and read it back to us.
Okay, so would it be motion to recommend to village board the modifications to Chapter 535 zoning, Article 9 off-street parking as presented in staff report? Is that fair?
That works for me, honestly.
Works for me.
We're to the village board.
So Commissioner Klein, that was the motion you wanted to make?
Correct. Yes. Thank you.
Okay. Is there a second? Oh, Trustee Bachhorst?
I had seconded, yes, so I'll keep my second.
Oh, okay. So we have a motion and a second. Is there further discussion? Commissioner Kylie Miller?
Which board meeting of the village board do you plan to have Bart present this? Because then I'm wondering, is our August meeting with Wimmer Development coming back kind of a moot point, or do we still have things to consider for that application? I mean, if we go to the one-to-one.
It's too early to know.
To vote.
There's no way to say one way or another because there's no way to predict
All right.
what the board will do with it.
All right, but so like your first meeting in August, is that when you're thinking that this will come before the board? Or Bart, you probably know when you'd be ready for them. Huh?
Yeah, it requires a class 2 notice in the newspaper. So once again, that's typically a month afterwards. The first board meeting in September, I believe, is September 8th. It's a Wednesday due to the Labor Day holiday. So at the soon, that's when I would just confirm that with publication requirements and the village manager to make sure the agenda is available for that discussion. But the soonest it could come would be September 8th. Otherwise, you're looking at September 20th.
Thank you.
Commissioner Kudo,
I'm a no.
your hand is,
Oh,
Okay.
no, my hand's up just 'cause I'm too tired to put it down, but I'll just be a no.
okay,
Eventually.
okay. Thank you. All right, if there's no further discussion, I'd like to do a roll call vote.
All right. Trustee Bachhorst,
Yes.
Eric Kudo,
I'm still a no.
Dan Wicklund,
Yes.
Barbara Kiley Miller,
No.
Josh Pollock,
Yes.
Therese Klein,
Yes.
Ann McKay.
Yes.
Thank you, guys. Just sustainability is great.
Okay, thank you very much. Moving on to item 7, future agenda items. I feel like Commissioner Kylie Miller mentioned something that was kind of a condition, well, oh, it was a conditional use
Yeah.
requiring.
I've also thought of something else that's unrelated to that. When we did the comprehensive plan, Bart and our consultant really sold us on the form-based zoning. So then we kind of, I know that costs money to have that done, but you know, you got to get started on it sometime. So that we put out exactly what we're looking for when developers come to us, appearance, size, whatever that might be. And so we're going to have probably less controversial projects because things that don't meet what we want won't even come to us. So I'd like us to discuss what our first steps will be to get that going, especially as I know the village board is coming up for their budget meetings and whatever money that needs to be allocated for that should be talked about for this coming year. So anyway, that's something I think we should talk about. What's our next step on that form-based zoning?
Bart?
Yes, so if I could weigh in real briefly, I don't think this needs to actually be voted on because this is the next thing up on my to-do list, and I already do have draft RFPs. And so at the next plan commission meeting, you know, my workload pending, I definitely will bring an RFP for form-based code to the plan commission for discussion and consideration. And yes, we will be requesting this as part of the next year's budget from the village board. If they approve it, then we can move forward. If they don't, we'll have to find a different solution for it. But yes, I already have 2 versions of RFPs that I will merge. And
Can anyone?
Yep.
Okay, I'm back. Thank you. That's exciting to look forward to.
Yeah, I appreciate
So,
that.
great. Any other future items?
Yeah, I have one.
Trustee Bachhorst.
So sorry, I know we went over this the last time and I can't remember if this is a village board thing or a planning commission item, but the fact that only people who live in single family home or duplexes are able to get daytime on-street parking permits for $10 per year seems to be so antithetical to what we represent in Shorewood. So I would like us to change that. I think that that is very much in line with the decision we made tonight and also the community that we all say that we want to be. So is that a planning commission change?
No, that's outside of the zoning chapter, so it's a village board consideration. I think it's in chapter 500, so that would be a village board future item.
All right, I forgot it last time, so hopefully one of you guys.
Okay, point of clarification too, we made a recommendation tonight not a decision necessarily.
True.
Okay. Other future items? Trustee Stokebrand, I see your hand up.
Thank you, President McCaig. First of all, I want to thank everyone for all their hard work on these issues. These are complicated, and I appreciate everyone's time and due diligence on the issues. I do want to address something that doesn't have to do with planning and zoning, but is a concern to me. At the beginning of the meeting regarding the meeting minutes, President McCaig made a comment that religious references would not be allowed.
Sorry, point of order here, guys. This is not a public hearing, and I understand you have an issue, Kathy, but I want us to stay on track here. So, and I'm also, anyway, it's up to President McCaig, but this is not in, we are in items of future consideration.
If I may continue, President McCaig.
Hello?
Hello, can you hear me?
Oh, I couldn't hear anything for a while. I don't know if it was just on my end.
If I may continue, please.
I don't think this is appropriate. And I will be one to say that this is not appropriate. There's been a lot about this meeting, not how it's been run necessarily, but that we've all let go on that's been kind of inappropriate. So if is this an item for future consideration for the Planning Commission, Kathy?
Point of order, pardon me. Trustee Bachhorst, you're not running this meeting. These are considerations to be made by the president.
Thank you.
Here.
Sorry.
Correct.
Yeah, I'm concerned that my internet connection is not stable enough. So what I'm going to ask is that we conclude this discussion of future items, and Trustee Stokebrand, if you could submit your comment in writing and we can address it at the next meeting.
And
yes,
one of the commissioners, Dan Wicklund, did have his hand up for a future item of consideration. I know you didn't see it, but I guess it's fine. He's waving it off.
Did you want to add something, Commissioner Wicklund?
Nope, I'm great.
Okay. I apologize for the technical difficulties on my end. So I would take a motion to adjourn at this time.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, motion is adjourned at 9:18 Central Standard Time. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks for moving us into the 21st century, everyone.